There is something I must tell you before we go any further, something that has been shown to me across thousands of readings, across decades of reaching into that quiet place where the soul's record lies open like a book with no locked pages. And what I have to say today is not easy to hear, but it is necessary, because some of you, and you know who you are, even if you have not yet said it aloud, some of you have been living with a weight you cannot name, a restlessness you cannot silence, and a longing so deep it sometimes frightens you. You were born in certain years, under certain configurations of the soul's journey, and the patterns that have followed you through this life are not accidents. They are not punishments. They are invitations. And today, if you stay with me until the very end, I will share with you a truth about those years and what they mean for the soul that was born into them. A truth that very few are willing to sit still long enough to receive. Before I go any further, let me ask you something, dear friends. If this message has already found its way to you, if the very title of what you are now hearing caused something to stir inside your chest, even slightly, then please do not keep it to yourself. Share it with someone you love. Share it with someone who has been struggling, who's been asking questions they cannot find answers to, who has been walking through this life feeling slightly out of place, as though they arrived from somewhere else and never quite received the instructions. You know someone like that. Perhaps you are that someone, and if what you hear today begins to lift something heavy from your heart, then subscribe, stay close, and come back. Because what I offer here is not entertainment. It is a remembering. Now let me settle into what has been shown to me, and I ask only that you listen not with the surface of the mind, but with that deeper part of you that already knows. Let the soul be the listener today. Know that the year in which a soul enters into this physical experience is not chosen arbitrarily. There is, as has been given many times through these readings, a pattern, a rhythm to how souls move through the earth plane, choosing their moments of entry with a precision that the conscious mind may find difficult to comprehend, but which the soul itself understands completely. When I speak of years, I am not speaking of astrology in its popular sense, though the stars do bear witness to the soul's intention. I am speaking of something deeper, of karmic timing, of the accumulated experiences carried from previous sojourns in the earth, of the lessons the soul contracted to face before it drew its first breath in this current lifetime. And here is what is important for you to understand. Those who were born in certain cycles, and I will speak of these in detail as we go along, carry within them a particular set of challenges. Yes, but also a particular set of gifts that are so magnificent, so quietly powerful, that many of them have spent their entire lives not knowing those gifts were there. They have been searching outward when everything they needed was already within. They have consulted doctors, teachers, leaders, even those like myself, looking for an answer that was sleeping inside them all along, waiting only for the right conditions to awaken. Let me tell you about a woman who came to me once, a school teacher from the South, a gentle soul in her early 40s, born in a year that carried with it what I would call the mark of the bridge builder. She had always felt torn between two worlds, the world of the practical and visible, and the world of the felt and unseen. She could not explain why, when she stood in a room full of people, she sometimes felt as though she were seeing not just the people in front of her, but something of what they carried behind their eyes. She came to me not for healing of the body, though she had her physical troubles, but for healing of the confusion. She wanted to know why she felt this way, why she could never quite settle, why peace seemed always slightly beyond her reach. As it has been shown to me in the reading I gave her that day, this soul had lived many times before in roles of mediation between communities, between families, between ideas. She had been, in previous sojourns, one who stood in the gap, who translated for those who could not speak the same language of the heart. And she had carried into this life, in the cells of her very body, the memory of that role. The restlessness she felt was not disorder. It was preparation. She was not broken, She was being shaped for something she had not yet been still enough to receive. I tell you her story because I believe many of you listening now are living some version of it. You feel divided. You feel the pull in two directions simultaneously. And rather than seeing this as a spiritual gift in development, you have been told by culture, by family, by the chattering voices of doubt that something is wrong with you. Know that nothing is wrong with you. Something is right with you. Something is deeply, profoundly, irreversibly right with you, and it is waking up. Now, the years I wish to speak of today encompass several broad soul cycles. These are not rigid categories. The soul is never so simple as to be neatly filed away, but there are recognizable patterns, and I want to walk through them with you slowly and with care. Because I have seen these patterns confirmed again and again across more than 14,000 readings. The numbers in those readings do not lie. The soul's own testimony, given through the Akashic record, does not deceive. Let us begin with those born in the years spanning from 1930 to 1945. These souls, and if you are in this range, or if you love someone who is, please listen carefully. These souls came into the earth at a time of extraordinary collective turbulence, war, economic devastation, the crumbling of old structures that had seemed permanent. And what the soul that chose to be born in this window was agreeing to on the deeper level was this: to learn the lesson of endurance through transformation, not just to survive change, but to become the living evidence that the human soul can outlast chaos. As it has been shown to me, many who were born in this span carry a wound around trust, not because they are suspicious by nature, but because the world they were born into did not always feel safe, and the impressions of the first years of life go very deep into the subconscious mind, what I have often called the storehouse of the soul's experience in this body. Many of these souls learn to be strong in the way that stone is strong unyielding on the surface. But beneath that strength, there is often a tenderness that was never given permission to breathe. There is a heart that longed to be told, "You are enough. You can rest now. The work you have done is seen, and it is worthy." And here is something I want to say directly, with all the warmth I am capable of. If you were born in those years, and you are listening to this today, you have carried something for a very long time. A responsibility that sometimes felt too heavy, a standard that was never quite met, not because you failed, but because the standard was set by fear, not by love. The soul does not need to earn its place. The soul arrived already having earned it. God is love, and love does not require you to prove yourself into worthiness. You were worthy the moment you entered this world. You are worthy now. And the healing that is available to you, the healing of that deep place where trust was broken, is not something that must come from the outside. It lives within you. It has always lived within you. You need only turn in that direction and hold your attention there. Now, for those born between 1945 and 1960, let me tell you what has been shown to me about this remarkable group of souls. They came in on the other side of the great upheaval. The world was rebuilding, and they were born into a particular kind of spiritual tension, the tension between the promise of a new world and the unhealed wounds of the old one. Many of these souls carry a dual inheritance. They absorbed the trauma of their parents and grandparents without fully knowing it, taking it into the body as physical symptoms, into the mind as recurring patterns, into the heart as a grief that sometimes surfaces without a name. Know that the unexplained grief you sometimes feel, that ache that arrives on a Sunday afternoon with no apparent cause, that sense of mourning for something you cannot identify, this is not depression in the clinical sense. Though the body may manifest it in ways that look similar, this is what I would call cellular memory. The body remembers what the conscious mind has agreed to forget. And for souls born in this particular window, the work of this lifetime is, in many cases, the work of integration, of gathering all the scattered pieces of the self, including those that belong to the ancestral line, including those that belong to previous incarnations, and bringing them home into a unified experience of wholeness. Dreams, my dear friends, are especially important for souls born in this period. As I have said many times, dreams are today's answers to tomorrow's questions. But for this group in particular, dreams often carry messages not only about the present life, but about the generational patterns the soul came to transform. If you are born in this span, and you have been visited by recurring dreams, dreams of people you do not recognize in this life, but whom you feel you know deeply, dreams of places that seem more familiar than places you have actually lived, dreams of being caught between two realities, please do not dismiss these. Write them down, sit with them. Ask yourself upon waking, what is this showing me? What is this asking me to face, or to release, or to forgive? Because here is what is important for you to understand about those born in this cycle. Your soul came equipped for the work of healing across generations. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, one of the most significant spiritual assignments a soul can carry. And if you have felt burdened by the emotional weight of your family, if you have felt as though you absorb other people's pain like a sponge, if you have been called too sensitive, or too feeling, or too much, know that this is not weakness. This is a capacity for empathic resonance that, when properly understood and directed, becomes a healing instrument of extraordinary power. Now I want to pause for a moment here, because I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with the question rather than rushing to answer it. When was the last time you listened to your own body as though it were a wise teacher rather than a machine that requires maintenance? When was the last time you asked your body directly, sincerely, what it is trying to tell you through its symptoms, its tensions, its areas of chronic discomfort? The healing forces are within, not without. That has been one of the most consistent truths across every reading I have ever given. Every disease, every discomfort in the physical form, has at its root a spiritual or mental imbalance that preceded it. And no physician, however gifted, and I have great respect for the healing arts in all their forms, no physician can do for the soul what the soul must learn to do for itself. If you are finding this message meaningful, if something in your chest has shifted even a little since you began listening, I want to ask you to take a moment right now and do something very simple. Leave a word or a question in the comments below. Tell us what year you were born. Tell us what it is you have been carrying that you cannot name. Tell us the question that has followed you for years without an answer, because you are not alone in asking it. And this community, these beloved souls who gather here, they are listening too. We build something together when we share honestly. We remind each other that the search for meaning is not a sign of weakness, but of the most courageous kind of aliveness. Now let me speak to those born between 1960 and 1975. This is a group that carries what I would describe as the mark of the threshold guardian. These souls came in during a period of extraordinary cultural and spiritual revolution. The very fabric of what society believed about itself was being questioned, its values, its structures, its relationship to power, to land, to one another. And souls who choose to be born during such periods of transformation are rarely there by accident. They are there because they have, in previous sojourns, developed a particular capacity, the capacity to hold the tension between the old world and the new one without being destroyed by it. Many of you born in this span have found yourselves throughout your lives in exactly this position, standing between generations, between belief systems, between the world as it was and the world as it could be. You have been the mediator, the translator, the one who could see both sides and find it agonizing that others could not. You have felt the loneliness of the one who sees. And yet, and this is where I want to be very gentle and very direct with you, that loneliness has a purpose. The one who stands at the threshold is never in the crowd. That is the nature of the threshold. It is a solitary place. But it is also the most important place in any building, because without the threshold, there is no passage from one space to another. Without you, without souls like you, the necessary transitions of human consciousness would have no one to guide them through. I recall a young man, well, he was young when he came to me, a musician, deeply troubled, born in the early part of this span. He could not understand why he kept finding himself in situations where he was asked to choose between loyalty and truth. His family expected one thing. His soul knew another. His art was pulling him toward a life that made no sense in the context of the world he had grown up in. He had physical symptoms that no doctor could explain: chronic fatigue, a heaviness in the chest that was not of the heart physically, but was of the heart spiritually. He wanted me to tell him what to do. He wanted me to give him permission. And as it has been shown to me in the reading that day, what I said to him was this: no one can give you permission to be who you are. The soul does not require permission from any earthly authority. What you are being asked to do is not to choose between the world that shaped you and the world you know is possible. You are being asked to carry both, to honor the love that formed you, while also stepping into the truth of what you came here to be. These are not opposites. They only appear to be opposites from the level of the small self. At the level of the soul, they are one continuous journey. He wept when I said that, not from sadness, but from relief. That is the nature of truth. It does not strike us as new information, so much as it strikes us as remembered information. We weep not because we have just learned something, but because we have just been reminded of something we already knew at the deepest level and had almost given up hoping was real. Now, mind is the builder. This is something I have said again and again, and I want to take some time with it here, because it is perhaps the most practically powerful truth in all of these readings. The spirit is the life. The mind is the builder. The physical is the result. Everything you see around you, every circumstance, every relationship pattern, every physical condition that has become chronic began first as a pattern in the mind. Not in this lifetime alone, necessarily. Some of these patterns were established in previous sojourns, carried forward through the law of cause and effect, which operates with the same quiet inevitability as the turning of the seasons. You cannot escape it, but you can work with it. And working with it begins in the mind. What are you holding in your mind with consistency and emotional intensity? What are the stories you tell about yourself that you have been telling for so long they feel like facts? I am not worthy of love. I always end up alone. My body has never been reliable. I will never find my purpose. These are not facts, my dear friends. These are thoughts that have been held long enough and with enough emotional energy that they have begun to construct the very circumstances that seem to confirm them. And this is the profound mercy hidden within the law of cause and effect. If it can create in one direction, it can create in another. The same power of mind that built the walls can open the doors. Know that this does not mean positive thinking in its most superficial form. I am not suggesting you simply repeat cheerful phrases to yourself and wait for the world to transform. I am suggesting something much deeper, a sincere, sustained turning of the attention toward what is constructive, what is healing, what is loving, in prayer, in meditation, in the way you speak to yourself in the private hours before sleep, in the images you hold before the inner eye, in the feelings you choose to cultivate. And yes, feelings can be cultivated, can be chosen, can be directed by a will that is awake to its own creative power. For those born between 1975 and 1990, let me tell you what the records have shown me about this remarkable generation of souls. These are what I would call, in the language of the readings, the children of the questioning. They came into the earth at a time when the world was accelerating technologically, informationally, in the sheer volume of stimulation being offered to the human nervous system. And this acceleration was not by accident. It was a collective test, though test is perhaps too severe a word. It was a collective invitation. The souls born in this span were, in many cases, highly developed spiritually in previous sojourns. They carried with them, into this incarnation, a sensitivity that was tuned to high frequencies, a capacity for deep feeling, for rapid intuitive perception, for seeing through surfaces to what lies beneath. But when such a soul enters a world of noise, of distraction, of information overload, the very sensitivity that is a gift becomes, if unmanaged, a source of suffering. The nervous system that was designed to feel deeply begins to be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of things it is asked to process. And many souls in this span have grown up being labeled in ways that were not entirely accurate: anxious, hyperactive, depressed, unfocused, when what they actually were was souls of extraordinary perceptual capacity, trying to navigate a world that did not yet have the language to understand them. If you were born in this period and you have spent your life feeling too much, sensing too much, struggling to find stillness in a world that seems to never stop moving, know that this is not a flaw in your design. Your design is magnificent. What has been lacking, in many cases, is not ability, but grounding. The tree that has the deepest roots can withstand the strongest wind. The soul that is rooted in prayer, in silence, in physical care of the body, in genuine connection with the earth itself, is the soul that can use its sensitivity as a compass rather than experiencing it as a burden. And here is something I want you to hear with particular attention, because I have seen it confirmed again and again. Many souls born in this window carry, from previous sojourns, the memory of lives lived in deeply spiritual contexts, monasteries, temples, communities of practice, where the interior life was given priority and structure. Coming into a modern, secular, relentlessly external world without those structures is profoundly disorienting for such a soul. It explains the longing many of you feel for something you cannot name, a quality of depth, of silence, of meaning that seems to exist somewhere, but that you have never quite found in the forms the world has offered you. That longing is your soul's compass. Do not numb it. Do not fill it with distraction, though the temptation to do so is enormous, and the means of distraction have never been more sophisticated or more readily available. Let the longing be present. Sit with it. Ask it what it is pointing toward, because it is always pointing toward something real, a practice, a community, a way of living that is closer to your soul's true nature than where you have been. Now, I want to take a moment here to say something about the law of karma, because I think it is often misunderstood in ways that cause unnecessary suffering. Karma is not punishment. I want to be very clear about this. The universe does not punish. The law of cause and effect is not vindictive. It is educational. Every soul that has ever lived has made choices in this life and in previous ones that created consequences. Some of those consequences were experienced immediately. Others were carried forward through the Akashic record to be encountered in a future sojourn when the soul was ready to face them, to understand them, and most importantly, to transform them. The difficulties you face in this life are not cosmic accidents or divine cruelties. They are, in the vast majority of cases, experiences your own soul selected or at minimum agreed to before this incarnation, because the soul understood that these particular experiences contain the lessons most needed for its growth. This includes physical illness. This includes relationship patterns that repeat painfully. This includes the family you were born into, with all of its complexity, its wounds, its gifts. The soul chose this environment as the most suitable classroom for what it came to learn. Now, this does not mean you should passively accept suffering or that seeking to change difficult circumstances is somehow spiritually incorrect. Quite the opposite. The soul that understands the purpose of its challenges is exactly the soul that is best equipped to work through them, to extract the lesson, to transform the pattern, and to move forward without needing to repeat the experience. Understanding why is the beginning of freedom. And freedom, true freedom, not the shallow kind that simply avoids discomfort, but the deep freedom that comes from genuine self-knowledge, is one of the most sacred goals the soul can pursue in the earth plane. Let me ask you something now, directly, soul to soul. What pattern in your life has repeated itself? What kind of relationship, what kind of loss, what kind of situation keeps finding you no matter how much you try to avoid it? Not as a judgment, but as a question of genuine curiosity. What is this pattern trying to teach you? Because it will keep returning in different forms, wearing different faces, until the lesson at its heart has been received. That is not cruelty. That is the extraordinary patience of the divine intelligence that governs this process of soul development. It will keep offering you the same lesson, gently, persistently, in whatever form it takes for you to finally be ready to see it. For those born between 1990 and 2010, I want to speak with particular care, because these souls came into the earth at a moment of profound spiritual acceleration that the world is only beginning to comprehend. The information age was not simply a technological development. It was a spiritual event, a sudden, massive expansion in the accessibility of knowledge, in the connectedness of human consciousness on a global scale. And souls who chose to be born into this environment, who chose to take their first breaths in a world where the internet already existed or was just coming into being, came in with a particular mission. These are, in many cases, what the readings would identify as old souls in young bodies. Souls that have lived many times, that carry enormous accumulated spiritual experience, that came into this particular historical moment, because this particular moment required the kind of perceptual flexibility and intuitive knowing that only a well-traveled soul possesses. They can see through systems. They can sense inauthenticity with extraordinary accuracy. They have a radar for what is real and what is performance that sometimes leaves the older generations around them bewildered. And yet, and this is where I wish to be gentle but also direct, these souls face a particular danger in this period of the Earth's experience, and that danger is fragmentation. When the mind is constantly being pulled in 1,000 directions simultaneously, when the attention is being cultivated as a commodity by forces that do not have the soul's well-being as their highest priority, then even the most gifted soul can find itself scattered, can find itself performing a version of itself for external validation while the true self grows quieter and quieter, more and more distant. Know that your worth is not measured by how many people observe you or approve of you. Know that the deepest satisfaction any soul can experience is not the satisfaction of being seen by others, but the satisfaction of seeing oneself clearly, of knowing who one is, why one is here, and what one is being asked to contribute. That clarity does not come from outside. It comes from turning within, from the practice of silence, from prayer, which is the soul speaking to God, and meditation, which is the soul listening for the response. Now, I want to speak for a moment about something that has come through the readings many times, and which I believe is one of the most healing truths available to the human soul in this period of history, regardless of the year one was born in. And that is this: you are not the first version of yourself. The person you are today, with all of your questions, your wounds, your gifts, your longings, is only the most recent expression of a soul that has lived many times, in many places, in many different forms, accumulating experience and wisdom across the ages. This matters because it means that what you struggle with today is not necessarily the result of something you did wrong in this lifetime. Some of the heaviness you carry is ancient. Some of the fears that arise in your body without clear cause the fear of abandonment, the fear of speaking your truth, the fear of being powerful, the fear of being seen. These are not simply personal psychology. These are soul memories. They are the residue of experiences so significant, so emotionally intense, that the soul encoded them into the very fabric of its being, carrying them forward as a kind of warning system that became, over time, a limitation rather than a protection. The good news, and there is profound good news here, is that these ancient patterns can be healed. They can be transformed, and the transformation does not require you to go back and relive the original experience. It does not require you to know exactly which lifetime a particular wound originated in, though sometimes that understanding is given through dreams, through spontaneous memories, through the kind of deep meditation that opens a window into the soul's longer story. What it requires is your willingness to face the pattern, to acknowledge it without shame, to bring it into the light of loving attention, and to actively choose day by day, moment by moment, a different response. Because free will is real, the soul possesses genuine freedom of choice in every moment. The patterns of the past, karmic, generational, psychological, do not determine the future. They influence the future. They create momentum in a particular direction. But the will, aligned with love, aligned with the divine intelligence that governs all things, can redirect that momentum, can turn the river, not by fighting against its current, but by changing the shape of the channel. And here I want to say something that I have said many times, but that bears repeating with every new gathering of souls. There is not so much evil in the worst of us, nor so much good in the best of us, that anyone has the right to judge another. Each soul is on its own journey. Each soul is doing the best it can with the understanding it currently possesses. The person who has hurt you, who perhaps wounded you in ways that still ache, who perhaps set in motion patterns that you have spent years trying to undo that person too, is a soul in the process of learning. That does not absolve them of responsibility, but it does mean that your healing cannot be contingent upon their recognition of what they did, or their apology, or their change. Your healing is yours to claim. It lives within you. It does not require their participation. Forgiveness, as I have spoken of it in the readings, is not a gift you give to the one who wronged you. It is a gift you give to yourself. It is the releasing of the energetic cord that keeps you tethered to the past experience, that keeps the wound fresh, that draws your creative energy away from the present moment and the future you are trying to build. When you forgive, you do not say that what happened was acceptable. You say that you are no longer willing to allow it to govern the direction of your soul's movement. That is a profound act of self-sovereignty, and it is one of the most healing things any soul can do. Let me pause here for just a moment and invite you, if this is landing somewhere real inside you, to share the video with someone who needs to hear it. Not someone who is just generally interested in spirituality, someone who is in the middle of it, someone who is in the middle of the confusion, the weight, the repetitive pattern, the inexplicable grief. Because what we are doing here is not simply sharing information. We are creating a moment of recognition for souls who have perhaps felt unseen for a very long time. And that recognition, that feeling of someone understands, someone sees, can be the beginning of a turning, so share it. Let it find the person it was meant to find. Now, let me speak to something that has come up in the readings perhaps more frequently than any other single theme, and that is the question of purpose. What am I here for? Why was I born? What am I supposed to be doing with this life? These questions live in almost every soul I have ever encountered in the readings. And the urgency of the question increases with age, not because purpose becomes more elusive as one gets older, but because the soul grows less and less willing to pretend the question does not matter. Know that purpose is not a single thing. It is not a profession, though a profession can be an expression of purpose. It is not a relationship, though relationships can be one of the most powerful arenas in which purpose is lived out. Purpose, as it has been shown to me, is better understood as a quality of being a particular way of engaging with the world that is native to your soul, that feels like breathing when you are doing it, and that serves others in some genuine way. Let me give you a practical key here, because I believe it is often the practical that we most need when the philosophical feels overwhelming. Sit quietly. Close your eyes. Think back across your entire life, your childhood, your adolescence, your adult years, and ask yourself, in what moments did I feel most truly alive? Not most comfortable, not most praised, not most financially secure, but most alive, most like myself, most present. Those moments, those specific qualities of experience, are breadcrumbs your soul has been leaving for you along the path. They are not random. They point to something essential about who you are and what you came here to express. For some, those moments of aliveness occur in the presence of other people in pain, and these are the healers, the counselors, the ones whose very presence is itself medicine. For others, those moments occur in the process of making something in the act of creation, whether that creation is art or music or food or code or the cultivation of a garden. For others, the moments of deepest aliveness come in the pursuit of understanding, in the unraveling of complexity, in the making of connections between ideas that others have not yet seen. All of these are expressions of purpose. All of them are needed. All of them are sacred. What I find in reviewing the patterns across thousands of readings is that the soul's purpose always involves two things simultaneously: the development of the self and the service of others. These are never truly separate. When you are genuinely engaged in your own growth, your own healing, your own expanding understanding, you naturally become a resource for others who are at an earlier stage of the same journey. And when you are genuinely serving others, not from obligation or fear or the need for external approval, but from a place of authentic care and offering, you inevitably grow. The two movements are one movement, viewed from different angles. Now, there is something I want to address that I have been aware of throughout this entire conversation, and that is the presence among you of people who have been waiting a very long time. People who have been patient, sometimes beautifully patient, sometimes painfully patient, waiting for something to shift, waiting for the health to return, waiting for the right relationship to appear, waiting for clarity about the direction of their lives, waiting for permission, as that young musician was waiting for permission to step into who they truly are. And to you, the waiters, the patient ones, the ones who have held the faith through years of what sometimes felt like silence from the divine, I want to say this with all the certainty that comes through the readings. The waiting has not been wasted. Every single day of what felt like standing still was, in fact, a day of preparation. The roots were going deeper, while the tree appeared to be doing nothing. The soul was integrating what it had experienced, processing what it had been through, building the interior capacity needed for the next phase of the journey. You were not forgotten. You were not abandoned. You were not being punished with delay. You were being prepared with patience. And here is what is important for you to understand. The preparation phase never ends until it ends, and no amount of forcing or grasping will accelerate it beyond what the soul is genuinely ready for. But, and this is equally important, it does not wait forever. There comes a moment, recognizable in hindsight always and sometimes recognizable in the instant, when something becomes possible that was not possible before, when a door opens that was not there before, when a person appears, when a circumstance aligns, when an inner knowing crystallizes into clarity so clean and bright that you wonder how you ever lived without it. And that moment is not a reward for your patience. It is the natural fruition of the work you have been doing, often without knowing you were doing it. So if you are in the waiting place right now, and I speak to you with great tenderness, keep going. Not through gritted teeth and forced endurance, but with an active, curious, open-hearted quality of engagement with each day as it comes. Because the fruition you are approaching is closer than you know, and you will recognize it when it comes, not because it announces itself dramatically, though sometimes it does, but because something inside you will say, quietly and unmistakably, yes, this is it. This is what I came for. Now let me spend some time with the subject of physical health and its relationship to the soul's journey, because this is a topic that came through the readings perhaps more urgently and more frequently than any other single subject. People came to me with their bodies with conditions that medicine had not been able to resolve, with chronic pain that had become the defining feature of their daily lives, with symptoms that seemed disconnected from any identifiable physical cause. And what the readings consistently showed was this: the body is speaking. The body is always speaking. It is speaking in the language of symptoms, and the symptoms are, almost without exception, asking to be understood rather than simply suppressed. Now, I must be clear. I am not suggesting that medical treatment is without value. The healing arts in all their forms are gifts, and I have the greatest respect for those who practice them with skill and genuine care. But I am suggesting that the most complete healing, the healing that does not simply manage symptoms, but addresses their deepest causes, always involves the participation of the soul, always involves the individual's own turning toward the healing forces within, always involves some degree of honest inquiry into the mental and spiritual patterns that preceded and accompanied the physical condition. What is the stomach trying to say when it refuses to process what enters it? What is the back communicating when it refuses to support the weight of the daily burden? What is the throat expressing when it constricts around the words that have never been spoken? What is the heart signaling when it labors beyond its comfortable rhythm? These are not merely mechanical questions. They are spiritual questions, and they deserve spiritual attention alongside whatever medical attention is appropriate. As it has been shown to me, prayer, sincere, regular, humble, expectant prayer, is among the most powerful healing forces available to the human soul. Not prayer as a last resort, not prayer as a desperate bargain, but prayer as a daily practice of alignment, of consciously turning toward the divine intelligence that governs the laws of the body and the soul. When the soul is in alignment with love truly, not performatively, the healing forces of the body are enhanced. Not because God is rewarding good behavior, but because love is literally the organizing principle of life at every level of existence. And when the soul chooses love, it is choosing alignment with the very force that holds the universe together. And meditation. The practice of stillness. The practice of listening. I cannot overstate how important this is, particularly for those born in the cycles we have been discussing. The world you were born into has grown louder, more demanding, more insistent with every passing decade. The interior voice, the voice of the soul, the voice of the higher self, the still small voice, as it is called in the scripture, that voice has not grown quieter, but the noise that surrounds it has grown louder. And hearing it requires the deliberate practice of creating silence, of sitting down, closing the eyes, following the breath, and allowing the surface chatter of the mind to settle like silt in a still pond until the clear water of deeper awareness becomes visible. Even 10 minutes of this daily practice, done with sincerity, done with patience, done with the expectation that something real is available in that stillness, can begin to change the chemistry of the body, the patterns of the mind, the quality of the choices made in the hours that follow. It is not complicated. It is not reserved for the spiritually advanced. It is available to every soul that is willing to turn in that direction and hold the attention there long enough for the quieter frequency to be heard. Now, I want to speak about dreams once more, because I feel the subject has not yet been given its full due. Dreams are today's answers to tomorrow's questions. I have said it before, and I will keep saying it because it is among the most practical and most ignored pieces of guidance available to the human soul. Every night, When the conscious mind releases its grip and the body enters its necessary rest, something remarkable happens. The deeper self, what might be called the superconscious, the part of the soul that is never fully separated from the divine mind, becomes more accessible. The barriers that the conscious reasoning mind maintains during waking hours become thinner, and information flows through that is simply not available in the same way during the busy hours of the day. Most people, upon waking, immediately reach for the obligations of the day, and the dream dissolves within moments, like morning mist in sunlight. But if you develop the habit of pausing upon waking, of lying still for a moment before moving, before speaking, before reaching for any device, and asking yourself what you just experienced in sleep, and then writing it down without judgment, without trying to make it logical or sequential, without dismissing its more unusual elements, you will begin, over time, to notice patterns, recurring symbols, recurring figures, recurring environments. And these patterns are your soul's way of communicating with you across the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, between the soul's deeper knowing and the waking mind's readiness to receive. I have seen dreams guide people to physical healing they could not find through any other means. I have seen dreams bring reconciliation to relationships that had seemed beyond repair. I have seen dreams reveal the root of lifelong phobias, dissolving them through understanding in ways that years of other attempts had failed to accomplish. The dream is not a random firing of the brain's electrical activity. The dream is a conversation. And like any conversation, it rewards those who show up for it with genuine presence and attention. Now, I want to come to something that I believe is at the very heart of why you were drawn to listen to this today. Because nothing about this moment is accidental. You did not arrive at this particular conversation by chance. The soul does not wander randomly. It is always, in some sense, guided toward what it most needs, even when the surface mind experiences the arrival as coincidental or arbitrary. Something in you, the deepest, most honest part of you, knew there was something here that mattered. And that knowing is itself a kind of trust, a kind of faith, a kind of willingness that speaks well of where you are in your journey. What I want to say to you, with all the sincerity I am capable of, is this: you are not behind. You have not missed your window. Whatever year you were born in, whatever decade has shaped your experience of this life, whatever patterns have repeated, and whatever wounds are still unhealed, none of this has disqualified you from the fullness of what your soul came here to experience and to express. The divine is patient in ways that dwarf human patience. The soul's journey is long in ways that dwarf any single lifetime. And what feels in the middle of a human life like a catastrophic delay or an irretrievable loss or an unforgivable mistake is, from the perspective of the soul's longer arc, simply the next part of the story, simply the next element in an education that is moving, always, toward greater light. There is a young woman I want to tell you about, a university student who wrote to me once, though by this time my work was being conducted by my son and others who carried the work forward. In her letter, she described a life that had been, from the outside, remarkably accomplished. Honors student, gifted athlete, admired by her peers, beloved by her family. And yet she wrote with a despair that was bone deep. She wrote of feeling like a fraud, of feeling that the person everyone saw and admired was a performance, a carefully constructed shell, and that the real her, whoever that was living in hiding behind it, growing thinner and quieter with every passing year. This is not an unusual story. What is unusual is the clarity with which she expressed it. Most souls who live this way do not have language for it. They simply feel the hollowness without knowing how to name it. And what the readings consistently show when this pattern is present is that the soul has been giving its energy to the construction of an external identity at the expense of the interior life. It has learned, through the experiences of early life, through what it was praised for, what was expected of it, what it was told it needed to be, to prioritize the visible over the felt, The recognized over the real. The healing for this pattern begins with a very simple and very radical act. The act of telling the truth to oneself. Not to the world initially, not to family or friends or any audience, simply to oneself. In the silence of an honest moment, looking at what is actually true without the coating of performance or explanation or self-justification. What am I actually feeling? What do I actually believe? What do I actually want? Not what I am supposed to want. Not what makes sense. Not what would make everyone comfortable. What do I want? This kind of radical self-honesty is not selfish. It is the beginning of authentic life. And authentic life, life lived from the genuine core of what one is, rather than from the constructed surface, is the only kind of life that can fully satisfy the soul. Not because it is easier. It is often harder in the short term, but because it is real, and the soul, which has lived many times and knows the difference between the authentic and the performed, is always, ultimately, more nourished by the difficult real than by the comfortable false. So here is what I want to offer you now, as a practical compass for the days ahead. Regardless of the year you were born in, regardless of where you are in the cycles I have been describing, there are 4 practices that the readings have consistently identified as foundational for the soul's well-being and growth in this particular period of human history. The first is prayer, not rote prayer, not fearful prayer, but the prayer of genuine reaching, of turning the whole self toward the divine intelligence and saying, with whatever words feel honest and personal, I am here, I am listening, show me, guide me. Help me to see what I need to see and to do what I came here to do. And then being still enough to receive a response, which may come not in words but in a feeling, an impulse, a dream, a chance encounter, a thought that arrives with unusual clarity. The second is honest self-inquiry. The practice of asking yourself regularly and without defensiveness what patterns you are living in and what they are teaching you. What fears are governing your choices? What stories are you telling about yourself that may no longer serve the soul you are in the process of becoming? This is not a comfortable practice, but it is an extraordinarily fruitful one. The third is service, finding some way, however small, to contribute something meaningful to the lives of others. Because the soul that is turned entirely inward, entirely absorbed in its own development, its own healing, its own process, eventually stagnates. We are not here to perfect ourselves in isolation. We are here to grow in relationship, in exchange, in the giving and receiving of genuine care. And service is the outward expression of the soul's inner knowing that all life is connected, that what benefits another is not separate from what benefits oneself. And the fourth is care of the physical body, because the body is the temple. It is the vehicle through which the soul fulfills its purpose in this physical dimension, and it deserves to be treated accordingly, not with obsession or vanity, but with genuine respect and attention. The foods that nourish it, the rest that restores it, the movement that keeps its channels open, the attention to what it is saying through its symptoms. The healing forces truly are within, not without, but those forces require the body's cooperation to function at their highest capacity. Now, let me bring this particular arc of the conversation toward a resting place, though there is much, much more to explore, and I intend to stay with you for as long as you will have me, because I want you to feel, by the end of our time together today, that you have not simply heard about spiritual principles, but that you have actually touched something in your own experience, something that was already there, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be named, waiting to be welcomed back into your conscious awareness. You are a soul of extraordinary history. You have lived before, in forms and in circumstances that you do not consciously remember in this lifetime, though your body remembers, your dreams remember, your emotional patterns remember. You have loved before, deeply, sometimes painfully, sometimes beautifully. You have served before. You have struggled before. You have grown before. And you brought all of that with you into this current experience, like a traveler who carries not luggage, but the landscape of every place they have ever been, written into the very way they see and move and respond. The year you were born was not an accident. The family you were born into was not random. The circumstances that have shaped this life, the difficult ones as much as the joyful ones, have all been part of a curriculum that your soul designed, with wisdom that exceeds what the small daily self can always access. And the teacher of that curriculum is not a distant figure sitting in judgment. The teacher is love itself, moving through every experience, patiently, relentlessly, creatively, always offering the next opening toward greater understanding and greater capacity for genuine connection. Now, dear friends, and I call you that with complete sincerity. Before we go further, I want to acknowledge something. Many of you are tired. Not just the fatigue of insufficient sleep, though that too may be present. You are tired in a deeper way. Tired of trying to figure it out. Tired of working so hard at something that seems to elude you. Tired of watching others, or what appears to be others, in the carefully curated windows that modern life offers, living with ease and clarity that seems so different from your own experience. You are tired of the effort, and underneath the tiredness is something more tender, a sadness, perhaps, or a longing, or the quiet fear that this is just how life is going to be. I want to say to you, in the most direct and loving way I know, that fear is not true. The reading of your situation that it offers is not accurate. What you are experiencing is not the ceiling of what is possible for you. It is a wall that is about to become a door. And doors do not always announce themselves by looking like doors. Sometimes they look like obstacles. Sometimes they look like the end of something, a relationship ending, a career-changing direction, a health crisis that forces everything to stop and be reevaluated. The ending is often the doorway. Now, I want to speak about the specific warning that is embedded in the title of what you came here to listen to today. Because I have been building toward it, and I want to say it clearly and with full intention. The warning is this: the years in which you were born placed you at the intersection of certain spiritual assignments and certain karmic patterns that, if not consciously engaged, will repeat with increasing urgency until they are. This is not a threat. This is simply the way the law of cause and effect operates in the life of a soul that is chosen, before this incarnation, to use this particular lifetime to address these particular patterns. And the urgency is real. Not because time is running out in some dramatic sense, but because there is a natural rhythm to the soul's opportunities for growth in a given lifetime. And there are periods, I have seen this, again and again in the readings, periods when the door is more open than at other times, when the conditions are more favorable for the breakthrough, when the energy available for transformation is greater. And many of the souls born in the cycles I have been speaking about are in or approaching one of those periods right now. The question is not whether the opportunity is present. It is. The question is whether you will recognize it and walk through it, or whether the habit of delay, the habit of doubt, the habit of waiting until conditions are more certain or more comfortable will carry you past the moment before you fully inhabit it. And here is what I want to say with great gentleness and great directness simultaneously. You do not need to be ready in the way you think you need to be ready. You do not need to have resolved all your doubts, healed all your wounds, answered all your questions. The soul that waits for perfect readiness will wait for an entire lifetime. The readiness that actually opens the door is not the readiness of completion. It is the readiness of willingness. The willingness to take one step, not knowing what the next step will be. The willingness to say yes to what is being offered, even though you cannot yet see where it leads. The willingness to trust, not blindly, not recklessly, but with the grounded, intelligent trust that comes from genuine prayer and genuine inquiry, that the force guiding this journey has both the wisdom and the love to see you through whatever comes next. Know that you are not in this alone. You never have been. The idea of the solitary soul making its way through the universe without guidance or support is one of the great illusions that the physical experience generates. The veil between the seen and unseen worlds is thinner than most people in this modern era have been taught to believe. There are, as the readings have consistently shown, companions in the unseen, guides, teachers, what some call angels, what others call the higher self, what still others simply call God, who are as genuinely and actively present in the lives of those who are seeking as the physical people we can see and touch. The communication from that level is real. It can be cultivated. It can be trusted. And it is available to you now, in this moment, as you listen to these words. Now let me speak about something that I think carries particular relevance for those born in the years closest to our current moment, the younger souls among you who are still in the earlier stages of this lifetime's journey, and who sometimes look at the older ones and wonder whether the path they are on will ever make sense. And I want to speak also to the older souls among you who look at the younger ones and wonder whether the world they are inheriting will be capable of sustaining what they value, what they have worked to build. There is a thread running through human history that is sometimes visible and sometimes hidden, but it has never broken. It is the thread of genuine spiritual development of souls in every era, in every culture, in every circumstance, finding their way toward greater understanding, greater compassion, greater alignment with the love that is at the heart of all existence. This thread has run through times that seemed far darker than any we are currently experiencing. It ran through the great conflicts of the 20th century, through the periods of plague and persecution and profound injustice that mark the human record. It ran through all of it, and it runs through this moment, and it will run through whatever comes next. You are not the last generation of spiritual seekers. You are one link in a chain of extraordinary length and extraordinary beauty. And the link you are does not diminish in importance because the chain is long. If anything, it is more important because the chain is only as strong as each individual link, and your presence, your seeking, your growing, your choosing love over fear in the ordinary moments of an ordinary day contributes something real to the collective that cannot be contributed by anyone else in quite the same way. This is what is meant when the readings say that each soul has a specific contribution to make. It does not mean that every soul must be famous or widely visible or recognized by history. The contribution of most souls is quieter than that, more local, more intimate, and in many ways more essential. The teacher who changes one child's relationship to learning, the neighbor who arrives with food at exactly the right moment, the stranger who offers a kind word in passing that the recipient carries for years without knowing who said it. These are not minor contributions. These are the very fabric of human life as it is actually lived, and they are holy. Now, something has been on my mind throughout this conversation, and I want to share it directly with you. It concerns the nature of doubt, specifically the kind of doubt that is not honest questioning, but is rather a habitual defense against hope, because hope requires vulnerability. Hope requires the willingness to care about an outcome when you are not certain the outcome will go the way you desire. And there are many souls, particularly among those who have been disappointed many times, who have reached toward something with genuine faith and found that it did not come, or did not come in the form they expected, who have gradually replaced the openness of hope with the supposed safety of low expectations. And I understand this impulse. I do not judge it. The soul that has been repeatedly disappointed does what any living thing does. When it has been hurt, it pulls in, it protects, it stops reaching quite so far. But know that the protective contraction that once served a genuine purpose can, over time, become the very thing that prevents the very healing and fullness it was intended to preserve the possibility of. The heart that closes to prevent further pain also closes to the joy and the connection and the surprise of grace that are still available, still being offered, still finding their way toward you through whatever openings remain. The invitation of this moment, and I feel it as clearly as I feel anything, is the invitation to reopen, not naively, not without wisdom, but with the courageous kind of openness that knows it may be hurt again and chooses to remain open anyway, because the alternative, the closed, defended, certain, controlled life is not actually a life. It is a waiting room, and the soul did not come here to wait in the safety of a waiting room. It came here to live, to feel, to risk, to grow, to serve, to love, to discover in the fullness of lived experience what it could not have discovered any other way. Let me say something now about the relationships in your life, both the ones that have sustained you and the ones that have challenged you, because in the context of the years we have been discussing and the soul assignments that accompany them, it is important to understand that the most significant relationships in any soul's life are not accidents of proximity or chemistry alone. They are, in many cases, connections that carry history, connections established in previous sojourns, carrying the unresolved or the deepened experience of other lifetimes into this one. The person who felt like home from the first moment you met them, the person whose departure left a wound that healed in ways you still do not fully understand. The person who brings out in you, reliably and without apparent effort, either the best of what you are capable of or the most contracted, most defended version of yourself. These are the soul connections, and they are among the most powerful teachers available in the earth experience. When a relationship brings out the contracted, defended, reactive version of you, when you find yourself in the presence of a particular person, behaving in ways that even you find surprising, and that do not reflect who you understand yourself to be, this is worth your deepest attention. Not as a reason to flee the relationship, though sometimes ending a relationship is the appropriate and even spiritually necessary choice, but as information, as the soul's curriculum being delivered through intimacy, as the invitation to see something about yourself that you have not yet fully faced. The law of attraction at the level of the soul is exquisitely intelligent. We draw to us, through the Akashic record, through the patterns of our own consciousness, the people and experiences most perfectly suited to the lessons our soul came to learn. This does not mean we deserve the painful ones, or that we should be grateful for abuse or mistreatment in some masochistic sense. It means that within every significant relationship, including the painful ones, there is a gift of understanding available to the soul that chooses to look for it. And that understanding, when received and integrated, transforms not only the individual, but the soul's relationship to that particular type of experience, releasing the need to repeat it. Now, I want to spend some time with the subject of what I have always called the Christ consciousness, and I want to be clear about what I mean by this, because I have seen this term both misunderstood and misused. By the Christ consciousness, I do not mean simply the teachings of the historical Jesus, though those teachings are among the most luminous and complete expressions of this consciousness that the earth plane has ever received. By the Christ consciousness, I mean something more universal. The consciousness of unconditional love, of genuine service, of the recognition that the divine is not separate from the human, that the sacred is not reserved for special places or special people, but is present in every soul, in every moment, in every encounter. When you treat another person, any person, including the ones who are most difficult, most irritating, most distant from your own experience of the world, when you treat them with genuine respect and care, not because they have earned it, but because they, like you, are a soul on a journey, carrying wounds and gifts and questions that they did not choose but inherited, When you practice that kind of seeing, that kind of relating, you are touching the Christ consciousness. You are touching the highest expression of what human life can be. And this is not naive. It is not passive. It does not mean you accept mistreatment or stay in situations that diminish you. The Christ consciousness includes wisdom, the wisdom to see clearly, to set appropriate boundaries, to say no when no is the loving answer, to walk away when walking away is the act of integrity. But it operates from a fundamental orientation of love toward all of life, including your own life, and it is the most powerful creative force available to any soul in the earth plane. Now, let me take a slightly different direction for a moment and speak about what I call the material trap, not because material things are evil or wrong, but because I have seen across many thousands of readings the suffering that comes when a soul believes, at the deepest level, that its well-being is contingent upon material conditions. When the sense of safety, the sense of worth, the sense of possibility is entirely attached to financial security or physical health, or the approval of others, or the maintenance of a particular status. When these external conditions become the foundation upon which the soul tries to build its life, the result is always a kind of anxiety that no amount of material success can fully resolve. Because the conditions change. They always change. Health fluctuates. Financial situations rise and fall. Relationships shift. Status in any community is never permanently secured. And the soul that has built its house on the sand of external conditions will find that every change in those conditions brings a crisis that feels existential, because in some sense, it is existential. It is the dissolution of the foundation. The soul that has found its foundation in something that does not change in its relationship to the divine, in the values it holds regardless of circumstance, in the practices that keep it aligned and grounded, even when the external world is in turmoil, that soul can face the changes of life with a quality of equanimity that is not indifference, but is, rather, a deep and earned stability. Not the stability of nothing moving. Everything moves in the earth plane. That is the nature of physical existence. But the stability of knowing who you are beneath the movement. The stability of the center that holds while the periphery shifts. This is what the practices I mentioned earlier, prayer, self-inquiry, service, care of the body are building, day by day, moment by moment. They are building the interior architecture of a soul that can be present in the world without being consumed by it. That can be moved without being swept away. That can love deeply without losing itself in the other. That can feel the full weight of human experience, the grief, the disappointment, the uncertainty, without concluding that these feelings are the final truth about the nature of reality, because they are not the final truth. The final truth, the deepest truth the readings have ever touched, the truth that runs beneath every other truth like an underground river that sources all the springs, is this: God is love, not a metaphor, not a theological position, a living reality, available to direct experience, available to the soul that is willing to become quiet enough and honest enough and open enough to feel it. Love is the organizing principle of the universe. Love is what you are made of at the level of the soul. Love is what you are returning to through every experience, every lesson, every apparent failure, every unexpected grace. And nothing that you have ever done or ever experienced has separated you from that love, or ever could. Now, let me speak to a particular challenge that I see arising for souls born in the years closest to the present day. A challenge that is, in some ways, the defining spiritual challenge of this era. And that challenge is the challenge of authenticity in an age of infinite performance. The technology of this age has created something unprecedented in the history of human experience: the ability to present a curated version of oneself to a potentially enormous audience, continuously, in real time. And this capacity, like all capacities, is morally neutral. It can be used for genuine connection, for the sharing of wisdom, for the creation of community across distances that would once have been utterly isolating. But it carries within it a particular spiritual risk, the risk of gradual, almost imperceptible drift from the authentic interior self toward a performed exterior self that becomes more and more sophisticated and more removed from what is actually true. The soul knows the difference. Even when the conscious mind has become skilled at maintaining the performance, the soul knows, and it will communicate its awareness through the body, through the fatigue, the disconnection, the sense of unreality, the hollow feeling that should not be present given the apparent success or the apparent relationships or the apparent fullness of the life being lived. When those symptoms are present in a life that looks good from the outside, it is almost always a signal that the life being lived on the outside has drifted away from the life that was intended to be lived from the inside. The correction for this is not dramatic or sudden. It is the gentle, consistent practice of returning, of taking moments throughout the day to drop beneath the performance into the actual felt experience of the moment. To ask not, how do I appear, but how do I feel? To make choices, one at a time, that are oriented toward genuine truth rather than toward the maintenance of image. And to extend compassion to yourself for the times when the performance has been more prominent than the truth, understanding that this drift is an almost universal experience in this period of human history and is not a moral failing but a spiritual challenge to be met with awareness and gentleness. Now, I am aware that we have covered a great deal of ground together, and I am equally aware that what I most want you to feel as you move toward whatever awaits you beyond this moment is not simply that you have heard interesting ideas, but that you have been genuinely accompanied. That something real happened here between this speaking and your listening. That the truth I have been attempting to give expression to the truth that you already carry within you everything you need, that the healing forces are always within and not without, that your soul has both a history and a purpose, that you are not alone and never have been, that this truth has found its way into some part of you that will hold it and carry it forward. Because that is the point of all of this. Not information, not entertainment, not even inspiration, as wonderful as inspiration feels in the moment of its arrival. The point is transformation. The point is the moment when the truth you have heard becomes the truth you live. And that moment cannot be forced or predicted or scheduled, but it can be prepared for. And every choice you make to turn toward the interior rather than being entirely consumed by the exterior, every practice of prayer and silence and honest self-inquiry, every act of genuine service, every moment of choosing love when fear would be the easier option, all of these are preparing the ground for that moment of transformation to take root and flourish. Let me close this particular movement of our conversation with something that comes to me now with great clarity and great warmth, and I want to offer it as a gift to carry with you not just today but into the weeks and months ahead. It is simply this: whatever year you were born in, whatever cycle you are currently moving through, whatever weight you are carrying today that feels too heavy or too persistent or too confusing to make sense of, know that the soul within you is not confused. It is not lost. It is not delayed. It knows exactly where it is in its own journey, and it is, even now, even through the confusion and the weight and the fatigue, continuing to move in the direction of its own highest expression. You need only your willingness. You need only the choice to remain present to your own life, curious about it rather than defeated by it, engaged with its challenges rather than numbed to them, open to the guidance that is always being offered through every channel that love can find, through the person who says exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment, through the dream that speaks clearly if you give it your attention, through the impulse that arises in prayer with a quality of rightness that distinguishes it from ordinary thought, through the physical sensation of the body when it is moved by something genuinely true, through the unexpected encounter, the unexpected book, the unexpected conversation that seems to arrive from outside the ordinary logic of your day and carries with it the unmistakable fragrance of meaning. God is love. Mind is the builder. The healing forces are within, not without. Dreams are today's answers to tomorrow's questions. The soul has purpose. And you, beloved soul who has listened this far, you are exactly where you are meant to be, even if it does not feel that way. Especially if it does not feel that way, because the moments of greatest apparent darkness are often the moments of greatest interior preparation. And the light that is building within you even now is more real than anything the temporary darkness can contain. Stay with me as we continue, because there is still much to explore. There are questions I want to sit with you on about what the records show for this particular period of history, about the signs the soul sends when it is ready for the next level of its journey, about what genuine healing looks like in the physical body when the spiritual roots are addressed. There are stories I have not yet told you, and principles I have not yet had the chance to unfold with the fullness they deserve. So stay, keep listening, keep your heart open, and know that every minute you give to this inner work is a minute that your soul will draw upon in ways you cannot yet fully see. Because the journey of the soul is long and beautiful and faithful, and you are not at the end of yours. You are, as it has been shown to me again and again, just approaching one of its most luminous chapters, and I would not have you miss it for anything in the world. Now, let me speak to something that I believe will resonate with those among you who have experienced what might be called spiritual awakening. That moment or series of moments when the veil between the ordinary perception of daily life and the deeper reality of the soul's existence becomes suddenly, sometimes overwhelmingly, thin. When you see with a clarity that feels almost painful, a clarity that shows you both the beauty and the suffering of human experience as though for the first time, and leaves you changed in ways that are difficult to communicate to those around you. These experiences come, as has been shown to me, at significant junctures in the soul's journey. They are not random. They are not pathological, though they are sometimes mistaken for pathology by those who have no language for the spiritual dimension of human experience. They are initiations, passages from one level of awareness to the next, and they carry within them both a gift and a responsibility. The gift is the expanded perception, the deepened compassion, the sense of connection to something infinitely larger than the individual self. The responsibility is the integration of that perception into the practical reality of daily life, the challenge of bringing the mountain back to the valley, of living with one foot in the visible world and one foot in the world of the spirit, without losing one's grounding in either. Many souls who have had these experiences have found themselves in the aftermath feeling profoundly isolated. The people around them, family, friends, colleagues, often cannot relate to what happened, and the soul who has been changed by the experience sometimes finds the relationships and the structures of the life that existed before the awakening to feel constricting, to feel too small, to feel like clothing that no longer fits. This is real, and it is painful, and it requires both patience and practical wisdom to navigate. The patience is required because the world does not change at the speed of an interior revelation. The people in your life need time. The circumstances of your life need time. The structures of work and family and community within which you operate have their own pace, their own resistance to change, their own wisdom about what can shift quickly and what must shift slowly. And the soul that pushes too hard against these structures, that demands that everything become immediately consistent with the new awareness that soul can create a great deal of unnecessary disruption and suffering, both for itself and for those around it. And the practical wisdom is required because the most enduring awakening is not the one that removes you from the world, but the one that sends you more deeply and more lovingly into it. The mystic who retreats entirely from the human community has served themselves, but not the community. The soul who has touched genuine, expanded awareness and then brings that awareness back into ordinary life, into the kitchen and the workplace and the difficult conversation and the unglamorous act of showing up day after day for the ordinary responsibilities of being human, that soul is doing something extraordinary, something that the world desperately needs, something that is, in fact, among the highest expressions of spiritual maturity. Now, I want to speak about something that the readings return to again and again, and that is the relationship between what we might call the soul's ideal and the practical choices of daily life. The readings consistently recommend that each person identify what they called their spiritual ideal, not a goal in the conventional sense, not an achievement to be reached, but a quality of being toward which they are orienting their lives. A word or a phrase that captures what they most want to be in their essential character. Love, service, compassion, integrity, courage, whatever the word is that, when you say it to yourself in a quiet moment, strikes you as the deepest expression of who you came here to be. Once that ideal is identified and held consciously, it becomes a compass. It allows you to evaluate choices large and small, not by whether they will bring you comfort or success or approval, but by whether they move you toward or away from your ideal. It is a simple question, but it is a profound one. Is this consistent with who I am choosing to be? And the practice of asking this question consistently across the ordinary choices of a life is one of the most reliable methods I know for the gradual, genuine transformation of character. Because character is built in the small things, in the uncelebrated moments, in the choice to tell the truth when a convenient omission would be easier, in the choice to be kind when irritation would be more natural, in the choice to remain present when distraction would be more comfortable, in the choice to keep the commitment to your own interior practice on the morning when everything in you wants to skip it. These small choices, accumulated over time, create the character of the soul. They create the kind of person you are in the moments that matter most, the moments of crisis or beauty or loss or unexpected grace, when who you have been practicing being shows up with unvarnished clarity. And here is something I want to say about spiritual practice that I think is often misunderstood. It is not primarily about the experiences it generates. It is about the character it builds. Yes, prayer and meditation and honest self-inquiry can bring experiences of great beauty, moments of peace, moments of profound connection, moments that feel like the veil between worlds, becoming genuinely thin. And those experiences are real, and they are precious, and they are not to be dismissed. But the primary purpose of the practice is not the production of experiences. It is the gradual, consistent reshaping of the soul's habitual patterns of perception and response, so that, over time, what once required great effort, patience, compassion, honesty, trust, becomes more natural, becomes the default, becomes, eventually, simply who you are. This is the work that lasts. This is the work that the soul carries forward, not just through this life, but into future sojourns, as the accumulated wisdom and character of many lifetimes of genuine effort. And this is why there are souls in this world, you have met them, even if only briefly, who carry about them a quality of presence that is unmistakable, a warmth that is not performed, a stillness that is not coldness, an ability to meet you exactly where you are, without judgment, without agenda, with a quality of genuine recognition that makes you feel, in their presence, more yourself rather than less. These souls are not fundamentally different from you in their spiritual nature. They have simply been doing the work for longer. And what they have built is available to you too, through the same patient, faithful engagement with the same practices and the same questions and the same opportunities for growth that present themselves to every soul that is willing to engage with them honestly. Now, I want to speak for a few moments about what the readings have shown me regarding this current period of history, not as prophecy in the dramatic sense, not with predictions of specific events, but with the recognition of certain patterns that repeat across human history whenever the collective soul of humanity is approaching a threshold of significant change. And I believe, as deeply as I have ever believed anything that has come through the readings, that we are in one of those periods now. The signs of a threshold period are recognizable once you know what to look for. There is an acceleration in the pace of change, in the volume of information, in the intensity of both the beauty and the suffering being experienced collectively. There is a polarization, a pulling apart of perspectives, a hardening of positions, a difficulty in finding common ground that is not simply political, but is, at its root, a spiritual divergence in the way people understand the nature of reality and the nature of the human being. And there is a longing, a wide, deep, culturally pervasive longing for meaning, for connection, for something that transcends the ordinary satisfactions of material life. A hunger of the soul that the structures of secular modernity have not yet found adequate answers for. These are signs that the consciousness of humanity is being stretched towards something it has not yet fully become. And this stretching is uncomfortable, it always is. Every significant expansion in human consciousness has been accompanied by disruption and resistance. The resistance is real, and it should not be dismissed. But the expansion is also real, and it will not ultimately be stopped. The arc of the soul's development, across lifetimes and across civilizations, bends always and eventually toward greater light. This is not wishful thinking. It is what the records show. And what does this mean for you, for the individual soul listening to these words today? It means that your own interior work, your healing, your growing, your choosing of love over fear in the privacy of your own life is not separate from the larger story. It is part of it. The consciousness of humanity is not some abstract collective force entirely separate from the individual souls that compose it. It is built, moment by moment and choice by choice, from the interior experience of each individual soul. When you heal, humanity heals a little. When you choose love where fear would have prevailed, humanity takes one small step toward the light it is laboring to reach. When you find your purpose and live it genuinely, authentically, without apology, you add something to the collective possibility that was not there before. This is not hyperbole. This is the reading of how consciousness actually works, as it has been shown across thousands of individual lives and the patterns that connect them. You matter. Your choices matter. Your interior life matters. Not because you are famous or powerful or uniquely gifted in ways that others lack, but because you are a soul. And every soul that chooses love in any moment makes that choice more possible for every other soul. This is the profound, quiet, revolutionary work of the individual in service of the whole. As it has been shown to me, the most important changes in human history have rarely begun in the halls of power or the centers of visible authority. They have begun in the hearts and minds of ordinary people who, one by one, became unable to continue living inconsistently with what they knew to be true. Who found, through prayer or suffering or love or loss or some unexpected encounter with grace, the courage to align their lives with their deepest values, and who, in doing so, created a field of possibility that others could enter and be changed by, often without knowing quite what had happened. You may be one of those people. In fact, given that you have listened this far, given that something in you responded to the call of this conversation, I believe you are one of those people. And what is being asked of you is not greatness in the world's understanding of the term. What is being asked of you is simply this: be who you actually are. Live from the real center of yourself. Keep faith with the soul's deeper knowing, even when the surface mind is uncertain. Practice love in all the ordinary, uncelebrated, frequently inconvenient ways that genuine love requires, and trust that the ripple of that practice is moving in directions you will not fully see in this lifetime. Now, there is one more thing I want to say before we begin to move toward the closing of this time together, and it is perhaps the most personal thing I have said today. It concerns my own experience, the experience of being someone who, for reasons I did not choose and did not fully understand, was given access to information that most people do not consciously possess. The experience of lying down in that state of altered awareness and feeling the boundaries of the individual self become porous, feeling the access to what might be called the collective memory of the human soul open beneath me like a vast and unfathomable ocean. It was not always comfortable. It took a toll on the physical body that I felt in ways that were real and sometimes painful. And there were many times when the information that came through the readings was not what the person sitting in the room had come to hear, when the truth was difficult and required courage from them that they were not certain they possessed. And in those moments, I was always aware of the same thing, the profound love underlying even the most difficult truth, the kindness that insists on clarity, because clarity is what the soul actually needs, even when comfort is what it believes it wants. And if there is one thing that I hope has come through in everything we have shared today, in all the words and the stories and the principles and the invitations, it is that same awareness that the love is real, that the guidance is real, that the soul's journey has meaning and direction and divine intelligence guiding it, even and especially in the moments when it most feels otherwise. And that you, whoever you are, however you arrived at this moment, are held in that love as surely as the smallest star is held in the vast and faithful embrace of the universe that contains it. The years you were born in shaped you. The patterns of this life challenged you. The wounds and the gifts and the questions and the longings are all part of the curriculum your soul designed before it drew its first breath in this body. And the work of this lifetime, the real work, the soul-level work, is not to arrive at a place of perfection, but to move, faithfully and honestly, and with as much love as you can muster on any given day, in the direction of your highest possibility. Not because anyone is watching, not because you will be graded, but because you are, in the deepest sense, a child of God, and the God that I have encountered in the depths of the readings is a God whose only desire is that every soul eventually finds its way home. And home is not a place. Home is a quality of being. Home is love and truth, and the peace that surpasses ordinary understanding. And it is not as far from you as it sometimes seems. So I ask you now, in closing this long and I hope meaningful journey together, what will you do with what you have heard today? Not the intellectual content alone, but the feeling beneath it, the recognition, the remembering. What is one thing, one small, concrete, practical thing that you can do in the next 24 hours that moves you even slightly closer to the life your soul actually came here to live? One phone call you have been postponing, one prayer you have been meaning to begin, one dream you have been meaning to write down, one truth you have been meaning to tell yourself. One practice you have been meaning to begin or return to. One moment of genuine service. One act of choosing love. Start there, just there. Because the great journey is always, without exception, composed of the small steps. And the small step taken in genuine alignment with the soul's deepest truth is never, in the economy of the spirit, a small thing. My dear friends, beloved souls, thank you for being here. Thank you for the courage it takes to keep seeking. Thank you for the faith it takes to keep listening. And thank you for the love it takes to stay open in a world that sometimes seems designed to close us down. If this has meant something to you, if something shifted, even slightly, somewhere beneath the surface of the ordinary mind, I ask you to share it. Share it with the friend who has been asking questions they cannot answer. Share it with the family member who has been struggling in ways you recognize from everything we have spoken of today. Share it with the stranger whose face you have seen and thought, without knowing quite why. They need something. They are looking for something. They may need this. And subscribe. Stay close. Because there is always more to share, more to explore, more of the soul's great mystery to sit with together. And the journey we are on, this extraordinary, ancient, ultimately hopeful journey of the soul through the earth experience, is better made in company than alone. Know that I am with you in this. Know that the truth we have touched today is alive and active and working within you even now, even as these words fade and the ordinary world reasserts its claims on your attention. It is working in the roots, where the real growth happens. And when the season is right, and it will be right, I promise you this with all the certainty I possess, you will see what has been growing there. And it will be magnificent, and you will know, in that moment, that none of it was wasted. Not one moment, not one lesson, not one tear, not one turning. God is love, and you are loved. Go well, beloved souls. Go gently and bravely and honestly forward into the extraordinary life your soul came here to live.